Chinese President Xi Jinping and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin have hailed bilateral ties as a stabilising force in a chaotic world, pledging to deepen their strategic partnership during a meeting in Beijing.
今天的中俄关系来之不易，值得双方倍加珍惜和呵护。中俄关系稳定发展，不仅符合两国和两国人民的根本利益，也有利于地区乃至世界的和平稳定繁荣。
Принципиальное значение имеет то, что отношения России и Китая не являются конъюнктурными и не направлены против кого бы то ни было. Наше сотрудничество в мировых делах сегодня выступает одним из главных стабилизирующих факторов на международной арене. Вместе мы отстаиваем принципы справедливости и демократического миропорядка.
The two leaders discussed economic cooperation, energy, and advancing peaceful nuclear cooperation. They also spoke about the war in Ukraine, agreeing that the conflict must not be allowed to escalate further. Russia has become increasingly economically dependent on China after Western sanctions were imposed following Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Dasha, Chernyshova and CNA's Olivia Siong looks at how the two countries intend to further deepen their relations.
This is a big show of unity in this trip that is steeped in symbolism. Mr. Xi and Mr. Putin spending a lot of time together since the Russian leader arrived, having multiple meetings, also attending the opening ceremony to launch a year of culture, also meeting the press in which they issued this joint statement agreeing to deepen their partnership. And in the Chinese readout of the meetings, Mr. Xi is said to have described the China-Russia relationship as a fine example for major countries to treat each other with respect and pursue mutual benefit, perhaps a veiled swipe at the West as both continue to face pressure from the US-led West, especially with Russia's war in Ukraine, as we've seen the two countries draw closer to each other this year, also marking 75 years of diplomatic relations.
They will be more cooperating on the international agenda. We understand that they had an opportunity to check the clocks on the international agenda. Also, trade is another issue that is very important for both sides, and especially for Russia. So we are expecting that the trade turnover, which has already exceeded the record of $240 billion last year, will be growing even further. And there was an issue of the clearance of the payments with the Russian bank on the part of the Chinese banks, and we have heard from the Russian side that the sides that Moscow and Beijing have been talking about this issue in Beijing, and that they were aiming to resolve these through dialogue. Now, keep in mind that this is the US sanctions taking the toll on the relations between these two countries, with the fear of secondary sanctions still being present among the Chinese banks. So this is another dimension here that is expected to be resolved. But obviously, Russia is growing more dependent on China, but it is supplying a lot of energy resources to Beijing, but also agricultural goods. We have heard that the supplies of Russian agricultural goods to China have increased by 53% last year. So this number is expected to grow even further. So politically and economically, that was an important visit, but also it is sending a very clear message that these two countries do stand together as they say they face the Western world that is trying to contain these two nations.